I was only 16 when I got pregnant. Just a scared, naive girl who thought love was enough to protect me from the consequences of my choices. I grew up in a small town where everybody knew everybody else and where even a rumor could follow you for the rest of your life. So when I found out I was expecting, I didn't just feel terrified. I felt trapped. My parents were strict, proud people. We went to church every Sunday, wore nice clothes, and said all the right things in public. But inside our home, there was very little warmth. Love was conditional, affection was rare, and disappointment? That was something we never talked about. It just hung in the air like a fog you couldn't shake off. When I told my mom I was pregnant, she slapped me. She didn't cry. She didn't ask me who the father was. She didn't hold me. She just slapped me, turned her back, and told me I had ruined my life and theirs. My father didn't say anything at all. He just walked out of the room. That night, I packed a small bag and ran to the only person I thought might understand. My older sister, Valerie. Valerie was 7 years older than me, and everything I wasn't: beautiful, smart, responsible, admired. While I was the wild one, Valerie was the golden child. She had moved out at 22, had a job at the bank, and was engaged to a respectable man. I had always looked up to her. Even when we fought, I believed she loved me. She had to love me. She was my big sister. When I showed up at her doorstep, crying, she let me in without a word. She made me tea, wrapped me in a blanket, and sat beside me until I finally blurted out the truth. I'm pregnant, Val. I expected shock, disgust, judgment. But instead, she held my hand and whispered, "We'll figure this out." Those 4 words were like oxygen. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Like maybe I wasn't completely alone. I stayed with Valerie for the rest of the week. We talked every night about what I should do. My instinct was to keep the baby, but I had no job, no diploma, no support. She said she would help. She said she'd be there every step of the way, and then she made a suggestion that would change everything. Maybe it's best if we don't tell anyone. Maybe I could raise the baby until you're ready. At first, I didn't understand. You mean, pretend the baby's yours? She nodded. It's just for a while, until you finish school. Until you're stable, no one has to know. It'll protect you. I should have said no. I should have trusted my gut, but I was desperate. I didn't want to go back home. I didn't want to be the scandal of the town. I didn't want to be the girl who failed. So I agreed. We told people I was going away to study with an aunt out of town. Valerie moved to a new apartment in another county. I stayed with her until the baby was due. And when the day came, she was the one who held my hand through the pain, who cut the cord, who filled out the paperwork. She named her Isabel. I wasn't even listed on the birth certificate. "I'll fix it later," she said. "Don't worry." And I believed her. For a while, I stayed close. I visited when I could, and every time I held Isabel, my heart ached with a strange mixture of joy and emptiness. She had my eyes, my nose, but she called Valerie Mommy, and I wasn't even allowed to call myself Aunt. "She's still too young to understand," Valerie would say. "Just give it time." I gave it time, 1 year, then 2. Then, 5. But things began to shift. Valerie started pulling away. She made excuses, canceled visits, changed addresses. I stopped receiving photos. When I called, she was always busy. And I didn't know how to fight. I told myself it was just temporary. That one day we'd sit down and tell Isabel the truth. That I'd hold her in my arms and say, "I'm your mother. I never stopped loving you." But that day never came because Valerie made sure of it. For 30 years, she raised my daughter as her own, and I stayed silent, too ashamed to come forward, too afraid of losing even the scraps of connection I had, until one day, a secret slipped and everything unraveled. After I told Valerie I was pregnant, everything moved fast. She stepped into action like a woman with a plan, confident, calm, almost rehearsed. I was a mess, but she was steady. That was always her strength. She made people feel safe, even when everything was falling apart. And I needed safety more than anything. I remember sitting on her couch, holding a cup of tea with trembling hands while she sat across from me with a notebook, writing things down. "We're going to figure this out," she said gently, "but we have to be smart about it. If we don't want Mom and Dad finding out, we need to act fast." She talked about options, about how the town would never look at me the same if they knew, about how I deserved to finish school, have a future, and not be labeled for one mistake. Her voice was calm. Her words were wrapped in protection, and at the time they sounded like love. I nodded along. I trusted her. She was my big sister. She'd always protected me from bullies when we were kids. She used to brush my hair before school, lend me her makeup, and cover for me when I snuck out with friends. So when she said, "Let me help you," I believed her. The plan was simple. I'd stay with her until I delivered. She'd find a way to explain my presence. Maybe I was helping her while she recovered from surgery, or taking some time to study in a quiet place. We'd keep it low profile, no visitors, no pictures. I'd give birth, and she would raise the baby as her own, temporarily, just until you're ready, she repeated. 1 year, maybe 2. Then we'll figure out how to introduce you back into her life as her real mom. I remember asking her one night, "Do you think she hate me for not being there from the start?" Valerie placed a hand on my shoulder. "Of course not. She know you loved her. And that's what matters." I held onto those words like a life raft. Over the next few months, we lived in that strange state of limbo. I stayed in her apartment, barely going outside, watching my body change with fear and wonder. Valerie cooked for me, took me to my doctor's appointments, even rubbed my back when the nausea wouldn't stop. Sometimes I felt like we were two sisters united against the world, like maybe this was just a bump in the road. And eventually, life would go back to something close to normal, but other times, I noticed small things. Valerie would get quiet whenever I talked about naming the baby. She'd frown when I said things like, "When I take her home someday." One time, I caught her reading parenting books in the middle of the night, highlighting sections, taking notes, like a mother preparing for a child. Her eyes would light up when she talked about her nursery. "I'm painting it yellow," she told me. "It'll be neutral and calm. The baby will sleep right next to my room." I said nothing at the time. I was too tired to argue. Too hormonal, too scared, too dependent on her to risk pushing back. Looking back now, I wonder, had she planned it all along? Did she ever really intend to give my baby back? The day I went into labor, Valerie was there. She held my hand through every contraction, wiped the sweat from my brow, and whispered, "You're doing great. Just a little longer." But when I finally heard that tiny cry, that first beautiful sound of life, and begged to hold my baby, something changed in her face. "Let the nurses clean her up first," she said. Minutes passed. Then more. And then I saw her, wrapped in a pink blanket, asleep in Valerie's arms. She looked like me, tiny, soft, a little furrow in her brow like mine when I was a baby. "Can I hold her?" I asked. Valerie hesitated. "Let's not confuse her energy," she said with a fake smile. "You need to rest." Confuse her energy? She was 1 hour old, but I was exhausted. My body was shaking. My head was spinning. I closed my eyes just for a minute, and when I woke up, Valerie and the baby were gone. The nurses told me she had taken the baby home to let me recover. That night, I lay in a hospital bed, a mother without a child, surrounded by the distant sounds of other babies crying in nearby rooms, and I cried too. But not just for the baby I hadn't held long enough. I cried for the part of me that knew, deep down, something was very, very wrong. They say the day you give birth is supposed to be one of the happiest days of your life. A day when the pain gives way to joy, when your heart grows in ways you never imagined. For most mothers, that day is unforgettable, filled with love, tears of joy, and first moments that are burned into memory. But for me, it was the day everything was taken from me. It was early morning when the contractions began. I had never felt anything like it before, sharp, deep, and all-consuming. Valerie rushed to get her bag and guided me to the car like she'd done it a dozen times. She was calm, collected, even smiling as she called the hospital to say we're coming. In the car, I gripped the seatbelt and cried out with each jolt. Valerie kept one hand on the wheel and the other occasionally on my knee. "You're strong," she kept saying. "You're almost there." We checked into the hospital under her name. I was listed as visitor, there to support my sister. During her delivery, the deception was complete. I signed nothing. The nurses never asked questions. It was as if my identity, my motherhood, had already been erased. Hours passed. The pain intensified. Valerie stayed by my side the entire time. And when the final push came, I screamed with everything I had left. And then, silence. Until I heard that tiny cry. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. A cry so small and raw that it cracked my heart wide open. The nurse said, "It's a girl." I burst into tears. My daughter. My baby. I remember reaching out with trembling arms, desperate to hold her, to feel her warm body against mine. But before I could, the nurse turned and handed her to Valerie. She asked to hold the baby first, the nurse said kindly. Not knowing the truth, Valerie took her in her arms and smiled down at her like she had waited her whole life for this. And for a second, I felt grateful. She'd helped me. She was there for me. Maybe this was just a moment, just a gesture. But then minutes passed, then hours, and I didn't see my baby again. I was moved to a private room while Valerie stayed in the nursery. The nurse told me she'd taken the baby to fill out the paperwork, get her measured, dressed. I asked when I could see her. Soon, they said. You need to rest. I didn't rest. I cried. I begged a nurse to bring her to me. She promised to check, then never came back. The next morning, my daughter was gone. I woke up alone in a hospital bed with no baby in my arms. I sat up, panic rising in my chest, and buzzed for the nurse. She came in with a tight smile. Your sister took the baby home last night. You needed time to recover. She took her? I asked, shocked. Without telling me? The nurse looked confused. She said you agreed that this was the plan. That was when I realized something had shifted. Valerie wasn't just helping me anymore. She had taken my baby, and now she was claiming her as her own. I called her phone over and over. No answer. When I was discharged 2 days later, she finally picked up. Don't worry, she said in her smooth, matter-of-fact voice. She's safe. You'll see her soon. But I didn't. When I arrived at her apartment, Valerie didn't let me in. She stepped out, closing the door behind her. She's sleeping, she said. You need to go home, rest. We'll talk later. She hugged me too tightly. I'm doing this for you, she whispered. For me? No, she was doing it for herself. That night I sat in my childhood bedroom alone, empty and in shock. My parents still didn't know. Valerie had managed the entire lie. And now I was left with nothing. No baby, no photos, no proof, just pain. I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? I had no documents, no custody, no birth certificate. Valerie had it all. And with each day that passed, my connection to my own daughter faded. Legally, emotionally, and physically. I told myself this was temporary, that once things calmed down, once Valerie had time to adjust, she'd bring the baby back to me. But weeks passed, then months, and the next time I saw my daughter, she was in a stroller, calling my sister Mommy. And I was just Auntie. Time has a strange way of numbing pain without actually healing it. Life keeps moving, days, then months, then years, but the ache never truly leaves. It simply burrows deeper, becoming a part of you. That's how it was for me. After giving birth and being shut out of my own daughter's life, I tried desperately to move forward. I returned home to my parents' house, silent and hollow. I told them I had been helping Valerie through a health issue, and they didn't ask too many questions. My mother always preferred denial over discomfort, and my father simply nodded and went back to watching TV. They never knew I had been pregnant. And Valerie? She played her role perfectly. She sent me a photo a few weeks after I got back. My daughter, swaddled in a yellow blanket, sleeping in Valerie's arms. There was a handwritten note with it. Isabel is doing great. You did the right thing. I'm taking good care of her. The words cut through me like glass. Isabel, a name I never got to choose. A life I never got to hold. At first, I tried to stay close. I would visit Valerie every few weeks, always under the guise of being Auntie. I watched my daughter grow from a distance, her first steps, her tiny giggle, the way she loved twirling around in little dresses. She had my eyes, my smile, even my stubborn little chin. But she had no idea who I really was. Every time I saw her, it broke me just a little more. I'd hold her in my arms, breathe in her baby scent, and whisper, "You're mine," silently, secretly, so no one else could hear. I clung to those moments, as rare and painful as they were, but something always felt off. Valerie began limiting my visits. She'd cancel last minute, say Isabel wasn't feeling well or they had other plans. She stopped sending pictures, stopped answering calls right away. It was always, "We're busy," or "Next weekend, maybe." And when I did see them, I noticed something unsettling. Valerie acted like Isabel was her miracle. She introduced her to everyone as my pride and joy. She told new friends, "I adopted her at birth. It was meant to be." I was standing right there, and she would say those words with a smile on her face, as if I were invisible. As if I had never carried that baby for 9 months. As if I didn't cry myself to sleep every night wondering what it would feel like to have my daughter call me Mom. Worse still, Isabel started calling me Aunt Lila. The first time I heard it, I froze. Valerie smiled and said, "Isn't it sweet?" She came up with that all by herself. I wanted to scream. She's not supposed to call me Aunt. She's my daughter, but I didn't. I was too afraid of losing even that sliver of a connection, and that fear kept me silent. Eventually, I moved to a different town to start college. I got a job. I tried dating, but every man I met could sense the heaviness I carried. I wasn't whole. How could I be? A piece of me, the most important piece, was being raised by my sister under a lie that grew darker with every passing year. There were nights I'd lie in bed, imagining what might happen if I showed up one day and shouted the truth. I'm her mother. Would Isabel believe me? Would she cry? Would she hate me? I'd never know. Because I never had the courage. And Valerie? She was always 3 steps ahead. She built walls around Isabel, wrapped her in love and stories and half-truths. She enrolled her in school, brought her to church, took her to piano lessons and dance recitals, playing the perfect mother in every setting. I became a footnote, a polite visitor, a distant relative with kind eyes and a broken heart, and yet something inside me refused to let go. A quiet voice that whispered, "This is not the end." One day, she know the truth. That voice kept me going through holidays, where I watched her open gifts not knowing I had picked them. Through birthdays where I sat at the edge of the crowd, clapping and smiling as she blew out candles, never knowing I had once whispered her name through screams in a hospital room. Through every moment that should have been mine, but wasn't. Something always felt wrong, because it was wrong, and deep down I knew the truth couldn't stay buried forever. It took years before I allowed myself to admit that something was truly off, not just in my heart, but in how Valerie acted. At first, I thought it was my own guilt distorting things. But then, the clues began to surface. Little inconsistencies, whispers I wasn't supposed to hear, glimpses of truth Valerie could no longer keep hidden. It started with a photo. I had come by Valerie's house one Saturday afternoon, one of the few visits she allowed that month. Isabel was about 10 years old by then. She was in the living room drawing, while Valerie and I sat in the kitchen sipping coffee. While Valerie stepped away to take a call, I wandered into the hallway and saw it, a framed picture on the wall. One I hadn't seen before. It was a family portrait. Valerie, her husband, and Isabel standing in front of a lake, all wearing matching blue outfits. But what struck me wasn't the setting. It was Isabel's eyes. They looked just like mine when I was her age. I had seen those same eyes in my school pictures, in the mirror, in my own mother's face. A chill went down my spine, and it wasn't just the eyes, it was her expression. The way she tilted her head slightly, the way her lips curved when she smiled. That wasn't Valerie's smile. It was mine. For a moment, I felt like I was looking at my childhood self through the glass. I couldn't unsee it. When Valerie came back into the room, I asked carefully, "Has anyone ever told you Isabel looks a lot like me?" Her eyes narrowed just slightly before she smiled.
"She looks like our side of the family," she replied. "You, me, Mom."
We all share the same features. It sounded reasonable, but something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. Too smooth, too ready. That night I couldn't sleep. I pulled out an old shoebox where I kept some of my teenage photos. I laid them next to the printout of Isabel's latest school portrait Valerie had given me at Christmas. The resemblance was haunting. It was like watching a ghost of the daughter I never got to raise. The next clue came from someone I barely knew. I was at the grocery store one afternoon when a woman in her early 50s approached me. I recognized her vaguely. I think she had gone to school with Valerie. She smiled politely and said, "You must be Leela, Valerie's sister?" I nodded. She looked at me for a second, then leaned in and said, "Funny how much that little Isabel looks like you. It's like she's your twin." I felt my stomach flip. I laughed nervously. "We do share genes, I guess." The woman shrugged. "Still, strong resemblance. If I didn't know better." She trailed off and walked away. If she didn't know better, what? People were starting to notice, and I was starting to believe maybe the truth wasn't as buried as I thought. Maybe it was just waiting for the right moment to rise. I became obsessed. Started keeping a journal of everything Isabel said or did that felt familiar. I noted every time she acted like me, spoke like me, moved like me. I even started comparing our handwriting. Hers was starting to resemble mine from middle school, but the moment that truly cracked something inside me came from Isabel herself. It was a quiet afternoon. Valerie had gone to the store, and I was alone with Isabel in the backyard. She was picking flowers and putting them in a glass jar, pretending it was a magic potion. "Do you think I look like Mommy?" she asked suddenly. I hesitated. "You look like you," I said carefully. She tilted her head. "Sometimes I feel like I don't belong." The words hit me like a freight train. I knelt beside her. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Just different." I hugged her, not as an aunt, but as a mother aching to say the truth. But I couldn't, not yet, because the truth wasn't mine to tell anymore. Valerie had stolen that from me too. But what Valerie didn't realize was that the truth has a way of surfacing. No matter how deep you bury it, no matter how long you run. And something inside me knew the day was coming when Isabel would ask real questions. And this time, I wouldn't lie. The truth didn't come crashing down in one dramatic moment. No screaming matches, no public breakdowns, no DNA tests. No, it arrived the way real betrayal often does, slowly, quietly, like a shadow creeping across your life until you suddenly realize you've been living in the dark all along. It started with a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I had come over to Valerie's house for Isabel's 12th birthday. The house was filled with decorations, pink balloons, and giggles from a few girls from school. Valerie had outdone herself, as usual, cupcakes, games, little party favors for everyone. I stayed in the kitchen helping with cleanup while the girls ran around the backyard. Valerie stepped into the next room to take a phone call. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I was right by the doorway, and her voice was sharp, tense in a way I hadn't heard in years. "No, she still doesn't." "No," she snapped. "I told you, Lila's keeping her mouth shut. She always has." My breath caught. She never tell her. She can't. Too much time has passed. There was a pause. Then, because if she does, she lose her too. I backed away from the door, heart pounding, a plate still in my hand. I placed it on the counter, my fingers trembling.
She was talking about me.
About Isabel. All those years of wondering if I was being paranoid. And in one sentence, she confirmed everything. Valerie knew the truth was a ticking time bomb, and she was counting on my fear to keep it buried. Later that night, after everyone left, I stayed behind to help clean up. The tension between us was thick, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. I couldn't keep it in anymore. I heard you, I said quietly, folding a tablecloth. Valerie froze. Heard me what? On the phone, earlier. You said I'd never tell Isabel the truth. Her jaw tightened, but she tried to play it cool. You misunderstood. No, I didn't. She turned her back to me, pretending to wipe the counter. I walked closer. You knew all along this would come back to haunt us. You knew I'd keep quiet because you'd made sure I had everything to lose. She spun around, eyes blazing. What do you want me to say, Lila? That I lied? Fine, I lied, but it worked. She's happy. She has a life, a family. She has a lie. She has me. Those 3 words hit harder than I expected. It was never about protecting me. It was about keeping her. Valerie stepped closer, her voice low and cold. You weren't ready. You were a child. You would have ruined her. I gave her everything you couldn't. I stared at her, stunned. You stole her. She was never really yours, she said. Not anymore. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not the kind of break that shatters, but the kind that hardens. I saw my sister clearly for the first time in 30 years. Not as my protector. Not even as family. As the woman who had rewritten my life to serve her own. I walked out that night without saying goodbye, but I knew what I had to do. The next week, I went to a lawyer. I explained the situation, asked what rights, if any, I had. But without being on the birth certificate, without ever fighting for custody or legally asserting my maternity, I was a ghost. I had no legal claim. Not unless Isabel herself wanted to seek the truth. That same day, I dug out every shred of proof I had. Hospital records with my name, prenatal visit summaries, even a faded ultrasound picture with Lila R. printed in the corner. I made a file. I called it, For Isabel when she's ready, because I knew one day she would ask. She would look in the mirror, look at me, and wonder why the reflection didn't match the story she'd been told. And when that day came, I'd be ready. The truth was no longer just a memory I kept buried out of shame or fear. It was a fire inside me now, and it was time for it to burn through the lies. The moment I confronted Valerie face to face, really confronted her, no more walking on eggshells, no more half-truths or careful questions, was the moment everything we'd built as sisters came crashing down. It was a Sunday afternoon, a week after Isabel's birthday. I couldn't stop thinking about that phone call I overheard. Her voice haunted me, the smugness, the control, the calculation. She had manipulated me for years, controlled my silence, taken the most sacred bond I ever had, that of a mother and child, and twisted it into something that served her. And I let her. That realization made me sick to my stomach. I knew that if I didn't speak up now, I never would. I had spent 3 decades swallowing my voice, but not anymore. I had nothing left to lose, except the illusion that I still had a sister. So I called her. We need to talk, I said. There was a pause. Then, fine, come over. When I arrived, she opened the door and stepped aside silently. Her face was unreadable. The house was quiet. Isabel wasn't home. Good. I walked in and sat down at the dining table. She stood across from me, arms folded, like she was already on the defense. I took a breath. I want to hear it from you. Say it. She rolled her eyes.
Say what? You stole my baby.
The words hung in the air like poison. She flinched, just slightly, then composed herself.
I didn't steal anything. You gave her to me.
No, I said, my voice shaking. You told me it would be temporary. You promised to protect me. You said we'd tell her one day. You never said you'd erase me. She laughed, bitter and sharp. You were 16. You had no job, no home, no idea how to raise a child. What was I supposed to do? Let her
suffer with a scared little girl pretending to be a mother?
She was my daughter, I shouted, standing up. She is my daughter, she shot back, eyes blazing. I fed her, changed her, held her through every fever, sat through every parent-teacher conference, every piano recital. Where were you, Lila? I was shut out. You pushed me away. You let yourself be pushed, she yelled, stepping closer. You wanted the easy way out, and I gave it to you. And now you want credit? A title? After all these years? I stared at her, stunned by her cruelty. I don't want a title. I want the truth. For Isabel. She deserves to know. Valerie's eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen in a long time, fear. No, she said quietly. You'll destroy her. You'll break her world. I stepped closer. Or maybe I'll finally set her free. Her expression hardened. If you tell her, she'll never forgive you. She'll think you abandoned her, that you gave her away. And maybe you did. Maybe deep down you were relieved. That cut deeper than anything she'd said before. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder I had prepared. My hospital records, sonogram pictures, a letter I had written in shaky handwriting the night before. I placed it on the table. This is for her when the time comes. If you won't tell her, I will. Valerie didn't move. I turned to leave, but just as I reached the door, she said quietly, You're not her mother anymore. I stopped, then I turned, tears filling my eyes. I never stopped being her mother, not for a single day. And I walked out. That conversation broke something between us that could never be repaired. Years of sisterhood, gone in one afternoon. But it also birthed something new inside me. Resolve, strength, the courage to reclaim my story. I knew I couldn't change the past. I couldn't get back the years. But I could finally speak the truth. And that truth, no matter how painful, was meant to tell, because the real crime wasn't just that Valerie took my child Dot, it was that she made me feel like I didn't have the right to be her mother anymore. But I do, Dot, and one day Isabel would know everything. Asterisk. Telling the truth was always the plan. That's what I told myself every year, every birthday, every holiday as I watched Isabel grow from a distance. Her, Aunt Lila, smiling from the sidelines while her true identity remained hidden behind layers of silence. But when the moment finally came, it was nothing like I had imagined. Isabel was 23 years old. She had just graduated college, full of dreams and questions about who she was and what came next. She called me one afternoon, out of the blue, and said, Can we talk? Just us? My heart pounded. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year. We met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between my town and hers. When I saw her walk in, I almost didn't recognize her, not because she had changed so much physically, but because she carried herself differently now, more confident, more independent. But those eyes, they were still mine. We sat down, and after a few minutes of small talk, she said something that stopped me cold. Aunt Lila, have you ever felt like people were keeping something from you? I hesitated. Yes, I said softly. I have. She looked down, then back up at me. I've always felt it, like something's off. Ever since I was little. It's not just that I don't look like Mom. It's the way people talk around me. The way she changes the subject whenever I ask about when I was born. It's like there's this invisible wall between me and the truth. I couldn't breathe. She leaned in. I've asked her before about my birth. She says I was adopted privately, that there's no paperwork because it was all handled quietly, but that doesn't make sense. No, I whispered. It doesn't. Her voice trembled. Am I adopted? I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder I had been carrying for months. My hand shook as I slid it across the table. Everything you want to know is in here, I said. She stared at it for a moment, then looked at me. Why do you have this? Tears welled up in my eyes. Because I'm not your aunt, Isabel. I'm your mother.
Silence. She didn't blink.
Didn't move. Just stared at me like I had spoken in another language. I gave birth to you when I was 16, I continued. Valerie promised to help me, to raise you until I was ready. But she never gave you back. She told everyone you were hers. And I was too young, too scared, and too ashamed to fight her. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came. I watched you grow up calling her Mom and calling me Aunt, and every time it shattered me. But I thought maybe one day I'd earn the right to tell you myself. She pushed the folder away. This is a joke, she whispered. No, I said, my voice breaking. It's the truth. And I've lived with it for 30 years. Tears streamed down her face. She lied to me? My whole life? Yes. And you let her? I had no answer. Just more pain. She stood up suddenly. I need time. I understand, I said. I'll wait. However long you need. She walked out of the coffee shop, the folder still on the table, untouched. That night, I sat in my living room with my heart in pieces. I knew telling her would break something, her image of the world, her trust in the only mother she'd known. But I had to do it, because even if she never forgave me, at least the lie was no longer poisoning our lives in secret. Days passed. Then weeks. I heard nothing, and then a letter, written in her handwriting, folded carefully, left in my mailbox. I don't know what hurts more, that she lied to me or that you let her. I need space, but I also need the truth. I read everything. I believe you, but I'm not ready to talk yet. Please don't contact me. I'll reach out when I can. It wasn't the reunion I dreamed of. There were no hugs. No mother-daughter moment of healing. Just distance and grief. But there was one thing I clung to. I believe you. That meant the world. The lie had been exposed. The chains had broken. And even if she wasn't ready to embrace me, at least she now knew who she was. Who I was. And sometimes the truth is the first step toward healing, even if it comes wrapped in pain. There's no manual for rebuilding a relationship you were never allowed to have. No script for how to become a mother to a grown woman who spent her life calling someone else Mom. No easy way to bridge 3 decades of silent secrets and missed milestones, but once the truth was out, I knew I had to try. At first, there was nothing. Weeks turned into months. Isabel didn't reach out again after her letter. I honored her request. I didn't call, I didn't text, I didn't email. I just waited, quietly, painfully, for her to come back on her own terms. And then, one afternoon, she did. She showed up at my front door. No warning. No call ahead. Just a knock, and there she was, standing on my porch, her arms crossed, her face guarded but calm. Hi, she said simply. I opened the door slowly, my heart pounding.
Hi.
She stepped inside, looking around like she was walking into a memory she'd never lived. She sat on the couch where I had dreamed for years of reading her stories, brushing her hair, celebrating birthdays that were never mine to attend. I offered her tea. She nodded. We sat in silence for several minutes, and then she said it. I've been angry.
I know,
I said softly. I felt like a fool, she continued. Like my whole life was a performance and everyone else had the script but me. I swallowed hard. You weren't a fool. You were a child. And we failed you. She looked at me, her eyes welling up. You let her take me. I did, I admitted, because I was scared. Because she promised it was temporary. And then I stayed silent because I didn't want to lose even the small piece of you I still had. The tears fell freely now, hers and mine. I can't just call you Mom, she said. Not yet. I know. I'm not even sure what I feel. That's okay, I said. You don't have to know yet. I just want to know you, however you'll let me. That was the beginning, not of forgiveness, not yet, but of something else. Possibility. Over the months that followed, we began to see each other, slowly, carefully. We met for lunch once a week, talked about everything but the past at first, her job, her apartment, her favorite books. Then, piece by piece, she started asking questions. What was I like as a baby? What did you feel when you found out you were pregnant? Why didn't you fight harder? Those were the hardest questions. And I answered them all with honesty, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. Sometimes she'd cry. Sometimes she'd shut down. And once she stormed out of the diner mid-conversation, saying, "This is too much. I can't do this today." But she always came back, and so did I. We visited the park where I used to imagine pushing her on a swing. We watched old home videos of her birthdays, ones I had watched alone 1,000 times. And one day, she came to my house with a small photo album. "Let's build something," she said. Page by page, we added pictures. Our first coffee together. Our first trip to the farmer's market. Even a photo of us both crying in the car after a tough conversation. It wasn't the past I lost, but it was a start toward a future. Eventually, we started therapy together. There were sessions where she said things that tore me apart. You don't get to be mad at me for being distant. You missed my whole life. I don't know if I even believe in family anymore. I feel like I was stolen, like I'm someone else's child in someone else's story. And still, she kept showing up. So did I. One day, after a long session, we sat in the parking lot. She reached over and took my hand. "I don't know if I can call you Mom, but I think I want to try." I cried so hard I couldn't speak. She squeezed my hand tighter. "Let's just see where this goes." That moment didn't erase 30 years of pain, but it gave them meaning. Rebuilding what was stolen wasn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It was about choosing day after day to keep showing up for ourselves and for each other. And I knew I'd show up for her every day for the rest of my life because I'm her mother. And now, she finally knows it too. People like to imagine forgiveness as a finish line, like once you say the words, the pain dissolves and everything returns to how it was. But that's not how it works, not when the betrayal lasted 30 years, not when it came from the person you trusted the most, and certainly not when the cost was your own child. Forgiveness for me was never about saying it's okay, because it wasn't. It never will be. It was about survival, about reclaiming power over a story that had stolen so many chapters of my life. After Isabel and I began reconnecting, she asked me something one day, something that stopped me cold. Have you forgiven her? We were sitting on a bench at the botanical gardens, watching the koi fish swim in lazy circles. The question hung in the air, heavier than anything we'd said that day. I didn't answer right away. How could I? Forgiveness is not a door you walk through. It's a hallway lined with memories, with flashbacks you can't turn off. The hospital room, the silent goodbyes, the birthdays spent alone, the milestones missed. It's the ache of watching your daughter love someone else as her mother, while you pretend not to flinch. Some days I think I have, I finally said. Other days, I don't know. Isabel nodded slowly. I don't know if I can either. That was when I realized forgiveness doesn't have to be a shared decision. We each carry the weight in our own way. I had to process the betrayal of my sister. She had to process the betrayal of the woman she thought was her mother, and neither one of us owed Valerie peace. Still, I tried. About a year after Isabel and I started rebuilding our relationship, I reached out to Valerie, not because I missed her, not because I wanted to be sisters again, but because I needed closure. We met at a neutral place, a diner on the outskirts of town where no one would know us. She looked older, more tired. The weight of the secret had clearly worn her down, but she still carried herself with that quiet arrogance, that sense of being in control. She didn't apologize. She didn't even flinch when I told her Isabel knew everything. I figured, she said. She's barely spoken to me. She has questions, I said. She's confused, hurt. She get over it. Her words hit like a slap. I realized, Ben, that Valerie had never seen what she did as wrong. In her mind, she hadn't stolen a child, she had saved one. She believed she had done what I couldn't, and that made her the hero of a story she had written without my consent. So I stopped waiting for an apology. I stopped waiting for guilt, or remorse, or tears. I looked her in the eye and said, You lied to her. You lied to me. And you stole something from both of us that we can never get back. She didn't respond. I forgive you, I continued, not because you deserve it, but because I won't let your choices define the rest of my life. What? She blinked. Then why are you here? To tell you this, she's mine. And whatever relationship you have with her now, if any, will be hers to choose, not yours to control. She looked down, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Silence, not power, not smugness. Just a woman who finally realized she couldn't control the ending, walked out of that diner and never looked back. That day, I chose peace over revenge. I chose my daughter over my resentment, but forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending those years didn't happen. It didn't mean excusing the pain. It meant acknowledging it fully, the trauma, the heartbreak, the helplessness, and saying, you don't own me anymore. Even now, when I look at Isabel, I feel both joy and grief. Joy for the bond we're building. Grief for the mother-daughter memories that were never made. There are moments when I still cry, when I see old photos of her holding Valerie's hand, when I hear her refer to her childhood as perfect. And I wonder what it could have been if the truth had been honored from the beginning. But then she reached for my hand at dinner, or send me a photo of her garden, or ask me about my favorite childhood song, and I remember we may have started late, but we're here now. Together. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering and choosing to live anyway. Secrets have a way of seeping through the cracks, no matter how tightly you try to seal them. And the one Valerie and I kept hidden for 30 years didn't just change the course of our lives. It left fingerprints on every corner of our family. At first, when Isabel found out the truth, she went silent. Then came the questions, followed by distance, and finally, the fallout. She stopped speaking to Valerie, moved out of the apartment she'd once called home, left behind the photos, the bedtime memories, the piano where she learned to play Twinkle Twinkle for the first time. She told me, I feel like my entire life was fiction, like I grew up inside a story someone else wrote. But it wasn't just her life that was affected. When my parents, Isabel's real grandparents, found out, it was like opening an old wound they didn't even know they had. My mother cried for hours, gripping the edges of her chair like she was holding herself together by sheer will. You were pregnant, and we never knew, she whispered. My father sat quietly. When he finally spoke, all he said was, Valerie did what we should have done. That broke me, because even in the face of truth, he still clung to the version of reality where appearances mattered more than love. My parents had raised us to avoid shame at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing truth. In many ways, they were the foundation of this lie. They created the kind of home where fear thrived. And they never realized the price of silence. My mother tried reaching out to Isabel, but she refused to respond. The betrayal was too fresh, the emotions too tangled. Isabel told me once, I don't know who's safe to trust anymore. Everyone who was supposed to protect me. Lead to. That weight didn't just fall on her shoulders. It fell on mine too, because even now, years later, the consequences of that secret ripple through every part of our family. Holidays are strained. Family dinners feel like tiptoeing through glass. There's always someone missing, either Valerie or Isabel, or both. I no longer speak to Valerie, not because I hate her, I don't, but because the trust is gone, and trust, once shattered, isn't easily rebuilt. Some of our extended family took sides. Some blamed me for giving Isabel away in the first place. Others whispered about Valerie behind her back. The shame, the judgment, the gossip, it all bubbled to the surface like poison long buried. But through it all, one thing remained clear. The min sim shamsi. Truth matters, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts, even when it tears people apart before it can bring them together, because the truth is what finally gave Isabel the right to own her own story, and that's something no lie can ever offer. She's doing better now. We're closer than we've ever been. But even she admits that some wounds may never fully heal. She still struggles with identity, with memories that feel half fake, with loyalty that feels split down the middle. Sometimes she'll look at me and ask, why did no one fight for me? And I tell her the truth, I should have. I was young and scared, but I never stopped loving you. And I'm fighting now. That's all I can do. That's all any of us can do. Once the damage is done. Try, show up, tell the truth, and hope it's enough. If you've listened this far, I want to say this. Thank you, not just for hearing my story, but for letting it matter. So many families carry secrets. So many young mothers are silenced by fear, shame, or control. And so many children grow up never knowing the truth of who they are. If you've ever felt like part of your story was stolen, if you've ever stayed quiet out of fear, if someone ever made you believe you weren't strong enough to tell the truth, I see you, I've been you, and it's not too late. Share this video if it moved you. Like and comment below if you believe every child deserves the truth, no matter how long it takes. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw, and emotional stories from the voices we rarely hear, the ones who lived it all and finally found the courage to speak, because truth heals, even when it hurts.